Introducing health and wellness advocate, veteran international real estate investment expert, author and speaker, Adiel Gorel.
Health tips, fitness tips, nutrition and well-being, world-class experts, all right here on my podcast, The Adiel Gorel Show. Hi everyone, it's such a pleasure to be here on The Adiel Gorel Show. Today, Chad and I are going to talk about a great interview that we had a little while back. We interviewed the urban monk, Pandit Dasa, and his story is remarkable. Hi, Chad.
Hi, Adiel. Pleasure to be here again.
So that was really special because, we are looking at the new book that I'm writing about my own life and experiences, and strangely, we drew some parallels between some of my paths and the path that Pandit Dasa took. I veered off into the regular world, the householder life, but he's now blending those two. So just a couple of things. Pandit Dasa has this nickname, the urban monk, and his history is fascinating. When he was young, he had not too many friends, not too many sources to give him information. So he turned inside. And his family moved to Los Angeles, where he lived a comfortable life. Everything was great. And then for business reasons, his father upped them all and moved to Bulgaria, which he was completely disconnected, no language, nothing like that. Once again, he had to go inwards, started to meditate. When he grew up, he went to India, for a few years. He lived in a monastery. No beds, nothing was comfortable. Woke up at 4, meditated at 5 for 5 hours a day, was at the service of others. In that intense monastery, he only spent 6 months out of the years that he spent in India. But then the interesting thing is, he went to New York City, Lower Manhattan, an area that I know exceedingly well and like. And there he was in a monastery in Lower Manhattan for 15 years. So he even told us, Chad, that next door was a liquor store, and then there was a tattoo parlor. But he was in a monastery for 15 years. That's kind of crazy, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I'm kind of afraid of the 10-day silent retreats, never mind the 15 years in the monastery. And how interesting that, he's in the middle of Manhattan, like you say, with the tattoo parlors, and then right in the middle, there's this meditation going on. But I think it's an interesting metaphor though, Adiel, especially these days, because mindfulness has come back, quite a lot, at least in the last 5 to 10 years as a thing. And it's like, how do you integrate mindfulness and meditation in a busy life, in a busy city? And so Pandit's story is interesting, even as a metaphor for all of us, because the idea is, you shouldn't have to go live in the mountains in order to meditate. You should be able to do it in the middle of the city and stuff like that. And I was, as you were interviewing him, I was thinking, because you and I have talked a lot behind the scenes about, your life, and you share a lot of interests with him. And at one point in your life early on, you were even considering going to India and places like that, and living such a life, like you were just saying. And so I wonder if you were having a bit of deja vu, like, oh yeah, I was thinking of that when I was younger,
Yeah, I was very enamored with meditation. I was very, enamored with the Gurdjieff teaching, the Ouspensky, and many others. And I was playing with, the idea of the solitude and going to the Far East. I think I like relationships too much for that. And when I read the book by Paramahansa Yogananda, I saw it kind of was like a light bulb for me, that you could live the life of a householder and yet be on a path. So that's what I chose. I do Transcendental Meditation. By the way, the Maharishi, whom we mentioned in the new book, said that if 1% of the world's population meditated at the same time. It has an effect on the entire world.
Mm.
That is a good analogy to having a monastery on the Lower East Side of Manhattan.
Hmm.
You have an island of peace and calm, and maybe it has an effect on the whole of Manhattan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they measure things like this, but I do know that um, not only has the movement around mindfulness and meditation exploded, but there's a lot of research to suggest that these things they call tipping points, that if we can get about 13% of a population doing anything, buying blue jeans, or in this case, meditating, that it would actually tip the world into being largely a meditative world, or buy blue jeans, whatever the trend is. And so, the explosion of meditation that has come up, where you don't have to go isolate yourself, you don't have to go on a 10-day silent retreat. You can do it. That lines up with what this podcast is all about, Adiel. It's like, how do you take the little everyday things and integrate them into your life so that they're usable? And finding that balance, like you were saying, being able to maintain the household still while still having a spiritual path.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. Even on the TV show that I did for public television, Live 201, I talk about meditation. I say you can't meditate for 20 minutes, 15, meditate for 3, meditate for 1.
Yeah.
And that'll give you he said the same thing. So meditation is important. But what he did after being in a monastery, he wanted to take those lessons to corporate America. So, mindful leadership, he talks about that. The idea is, like he said, you put your own, oxygen mask first, and then you take care of your child or somebody else. His new book is called Closing the Apps.
Yeah.
We have so many apps in our mind. Excuse me. And he says the average person has between 1,000 and 2,000 thoughts, per hour. If we breathed as much as we thought, we would hyperventilate. So thoughts come in much faster than we can deal with them. They sneak in. And as soon as you get rid of one of them, the next one sneaks in. So meditation of many kinds. I mean, I know the one that I do, you just let the thoughts come in and they go by. It reminds me of an analogy. In a basketball game, in the NBA, somebody is set up to shoot a 3-point shot. The defender jumps in front of them. They just let gravity, the shooter, lets gravity takes it. They jump and then they land. When they land, now they can shoot.
Right.
So it's like, the thoughts. The thoughts come in, let them land. Now we can shoot.
Yeah. Now, I know you've, tried on various meditation modalities over the years, Transcendental Meditation and others. Is there one that you like, that you do the most, that's really resonating?
Transcendental Meditation, because it doesn't create, an effort. In fact, the whole point is that it's, effortless. It's so much so that when somebody teaches you Transcendental Meditation, you have a license for life to come back and get your meditation checked. Because we tend to imbue everything with effort. And this is effortless. But what I like about it is that, again, the thoughts, you don't fight with them. You don't reject them. They just come and go like the defender in basketball. I'm used to it also. I've done it enough years that if I reconnect, I go down deep quickly. But I tried, you're right. Tibetan meditations and Buddhist meditation and light meditation. And somebody told me once, I don't know if it's true or not, but that the Dalai Lama was asked, what's one thing I should do? And I'll say what they told me that he had said. Dalai Lama said, let white light come in the following shape, like it starts at the base of your spine. It goes up from the back of your spine, goes up, and then it goes down again from the front of your spine. And it's a circle that you do all the time. You can do it when you're up, when you're down, when you're sitting, when you're bored at the lecture. For a while, I got enthused about it, and I did it. I forgot about it completely until right now. So maybe I'll try it again. but anything that makes us think. We will interview an immunologist from Stanford at Nippon University to talk about forest bathing. But he measures you when you go to the forest, after and before. Unbelievable effects. That is always a certain kind of meditation.
Yeah. And I've never done transcendental meditation, but I've looked into it a lot. I understand like you have to be taught how to do it and you're given your own mantra that you then repeat that. Is that kind of?
Yeah, so that's where I'm a little bit frustrated, because I like to make our viewers comfortable and easy and cheap and nice, and we can integrate it right now, like breathing through your nose. We can start right now.
Yeah.
Transcendental meditation does have to be taught in a few sessions, because it is so simple and effortless that as a human being, we will screw it up. We will screw it up. So that's why it has to be taught. Unfortunately, it's not cheap.
Right.
When I studied it, I was 18 years old, and my grandfather joined me because he thought I was joining a cult. He wanted to make sure. And it cost a few pennies because I was a soldier and I was getting a soldier's discount. But I think it's not cheap at all. I think to get the technique costs about $1,000. Now, it does give you a lifelong checking. My meditation was checked in Chile, in France, in England, in the US, in South America. But still, it's expensive. So that's where it gives me pause, because I would like our viewers to get into. So there's so much. You can Google stuff. For the Gen Z guys, there are meditations right there on your phone. So there's so much. Just do something.
One of the apps that has been out now for about 5 or 6 years that's quite popular for meditation and is much, much cheaper. I think it's like $7, $8 a month kind of thing, subscription, is Headspace. And you probably heard of it, but I know many people who are new meditators, maybe they've been intimidated, or they don't know how they can fit it in. So they want it on their phone. So maybe they have a moment throughout the day, and they even just start with 10 minutes. And so you could download Headspace for anyone who's listening and see if it's a fit. There's also Calm, which is another app that has similar things. They have different visualization meditations on there. But I think the point that Pandit was bringing up is that we live in just such a busy world, and you think 1,000 to 2,000 thoughts per hour. Most are unconscious in the sense that we're not generating them. They just pop in. The metaphor I use when I talk about this with people is like soda water. The bubbles in the soda water bubble up and they rise to the surface, and they just keep coming seemingly out of nowhere. You'd think the bubbles would disappear, but then more bubbles come from the bottom. And that's kind of like our thought life. These thoughts just bubble up, and we don't have to attend to them all. We don't have to do anything about them, but we tend to get reactivated by them. We tend to want to attend to them, pay attention. And then it's just a noisy headspace. And it's tough to explain to people, as Pandit was, and you and him were having a great conversation, that you don't know how noisy your head is until you experience the silence of the noise dissipating. And once you experience that, it's like, how did I ever live this way?
Well, I think maybe now on second thought, maybe for the Gen Z people who were born with a phone in their hand, I think that when a baby was born during the Gen Z baby, they swiped right on the phone, and right away, this doctor, I'm going to give him a 3-star review. These Gen Zs that are so glued to the phone, maybe a phone app like Headspace or what's the other one?
Calm, CALM. Calm.
Yeah. So those might be better for Gen Zers, but we are all becoming like that, because people have a very hard time spending 1 hour, away from this brick.
Yeah.
And the brick is full of the whole universe. People go on social media, people go here, people share what they ate, people share everything. And you want to see how many likes you got. So in this environment where we get stimuli coming in so hard and fast and so addictive, it's not easy to take some time. So maybe if there's an app, you push on it and maybe it gives you a couple of minutes. That's good. So one of the things we talked about with Pandit was negative. So I asked him, why is it that 100 things happen and I hark back and dwell on the one thing that was horrible rather than on the 99 things that were great? So he said, we tend to latch onto the negative. And he gave a nice analogy. He says, let's say you have a beautiful garden full of roses and flowers, and then a dog, took a dump in the corner of the garden.
Yeah.
Now, the bumblebee goes into the garden. The bumblebee goes to the flowers, the nectar, the beauty. The fly comes into the garden. He goes right to the pile of crap. Mm-hmm. So he says, do you want to have the mind of a bumblebee or the mind of a fly?
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can say that I have the mind of a fly. Or maybe a combination of the two, geared heavily, towards the fly.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So he said, look, we can train dogs. We can train our mind. Nobody has ever taught us how to train our mind. We have all of this sophistication. We have technology, phones, we go into space, but nobody talks about how we train our mind. So he said, the analogy of that is if you have a car and you are excellent at washing the car and making it gleam and be beautiful, but you don't change the oil. So we look good, but our inner world, the one that drives everything, he says, is really lacking. So, he says, we remember everybody who hurt us in life. They are closer to the surface. We magnify the negative. So he says, no, be thoughtful how you treat, other people. How you treat them remains with them forever in their memory. But it remains with you too. You carry that, around. So all the blame game, all the negativity, shaming people on national TV is not good education for kids. Yeah. You see that people you can always find the good, in every person. You can always have a different type of an opinion. So he said, the untrained mind latches onto the negative and not the positive. We are conditioned, actually. Turns out I'm not the only fly, in the ointment. Yeah. We are conditioned to look at, the negative. Even when somebody does a lot of good, somebody will find some fault with what they do, but this is how we're trained. So it's the ego, he says, making us feel good when we criticize, other people, make us feel righteous.
Yeah. And what comes up for me as well, thinking about what he's saying, is also that I think our brains, until trained, which is such an important thing, because if you consider the kids who are, at a very young age, imagine if we were training kids at like age 5, 6 to be meditators, and how they would be able to manage those thousands of thoughts an hour. But even more than that, the proclivity towards the negative, I think, has a lot to do as well with the inherent insecurity of our brain, in particular, the left side of our brain, which is just really only concerned with survival. And so seeing the negative is sort of a default to an untrained mind, because you're looking for the next threat. You're looking for the next thing that would put you into an insecure situation. And so you're always trying to evaluate what's not working, what's wrong, or what's negative. But living life that way is very uninspiring. I mean, it's just like everywhere you see devils and demons everywhere, sort of thing.
So he comes up with a remedy. And the remedy is not new. We all know about it. But he talked about it in an interesting way. Gratitude. Yeah. So practicing gratitude is the step towards starting to not just dwell on the negative and on the positive. You can have gratitude for everything. Like some people who are really already deep can forgive a person who did some horrible thing, and they're in gratitude that they learned something. But let's start small. He said, take 1 minute. You slept well. It was a good night's sleep. Gratitude. Yeah. You ate something. Gratitude. Starts as small things, but train yourself to express gratitude rather than the norm, which at least for me, taking it all for granted and then finding the faults and how it could have been better and why is it not better.
Yeah.
Because, it's like a bottomless pit. You can have a person who's really living an uncomfortable life, financially stressed, everything, but they can find the beauty of the flower. They can find the sunrise. And you can have a billionaire who is, I know it sounds cliche, but it's extremely unhappy and dissatisfied, because it doesn't matter whether you're a billionaire or not. It's how your mind works. So he said gratitude, it's a big thing. Start very small.
Right.
That would be a practical, free thing to do.
Right.
Time to time, just practice. Oh, look at this beautiful picture on the wall. Look at this beautiful thing. Look at this child smile. I know, cliche, but those things are good.
Yeah. And even before practicing what you're suggesting and what Pandit was suggesting there, because even that might be difficult for people who are in this habitual routine of always finding what's not working. What I started doing when I wanted to break that habit, as I think is just a common human habit, is I just started, when I'd wake up in the morning, I had a gratitude journal, and I would just write first thoughts in the mind. What am I grateful for today? That didn't mean that at 3 o'clock later in the day, I didn't observe something that it was negative or something, and I didn't have that thought. But it started me on that journey towards trying to find the good in everything. At least I started my day from that place. I didn't consistently view the world through that lens throughout the day, but I got stronger and stronger and better at doing it because I at least started there. So again, trying to simplify it for our listeners and viewers, don't beat yourself up if at 2 o'clock someone cuts you off and, you have a thing in traffic and, your mind goes to the negative. You can even just start with a couple sentences every morning. What are you grateful for? And that will start to shift over time.
When I was in Montreal, I was learning jiu-jitsu and kung fu. My teacher was a very remarkable man. He was in his 40s at the time. I was in my 20s. And he had this thing. He says, when I wake up in the morning, I just go, ah. And he was very exuberant. It's like savoring the fact that that you even woke up.
Yeah.
But you are, but the way he did it was so strong.
Yeah.
So, again, he says the mind makes things real. So if we dwell on the negative, our mind will find a way to make things negative. Oh, I shouldn't have gone out yesterday. It was freezing. Now I'm going to get a cold. Your odds of getting a cold now increased a million.
Sure.
Because you think, so the mind makes it real. And in fact, we talked about the Mark Twain saying, where Mark Twain said, my life was full of terrible occurrences, horrible things, most of which never happened. That is so true. So true. Mark Twain, I got to hand it to him. So he talked about a scene from The Matrix where Neo in The Matrix imagines something and his nose bleeds. His nose starts to bleed in real life. That's a movie, but that's, the idea. So gratitude, kindness, just a little bit. Let me give you an example. I took a lot of pride in the fact that when I go to restaurants or when I get service or when I'm on the phone with, AT&T or, whatever it is, if somebody was extra nice, I said, if you want, I'll be happy to send an email to your supervisor telling them how great you were. Because I actually felt I wanted to do that because most of the time is, what's your name? I'm going to complain about you.
Yeah.
So, that's again the shift. I'm not saying I'm a saint. I'm not a saint at all. But little things like this can get you there.
It's an interesting point, Adiel, because, you even think about Yelp or any, things online where people leave reviews. It's I read somewhere that, you will find at least 3 to 5 times as many negative reviews than you will positive. And it's just the same thing we're talking about. It's so easy for people to pick apart what doesn't work as opposed to being really present to what did work. And then the energy people have to go negative is easier developed or something like that. It just comes to us, it takes more effort until you practice it long enough, and then you can be positive and that effort can move in that direction. But you just look at how many negative reviews are out there. People are just incensed. They want to leave a negative review. So it's just more evidence that our brains naturally tend in this direction.
Well, if you think about it, when you have a negative experience, you get inflamed, literally like fire. You're very fiery. It's big energy. When you have a nice experience, it's calm. It's not that much energy. So it's harder to find the motivation to go on a website and type a good review.
Yeah. But knowing that, I realized this years ago. So I've even myself started to weigh less the negative reviews versus the positive. Like if I see a negative review, it's not that I ignore it, but I'm thinking to myself, okay, there's this many negative reviews. There was probably at least as many positive, but they didn't show up. They just never bothered leaving it, so you have to balance it.
You just got me this morning. I got to thinking, I wanted to buy a certain product. And so you look at the reviews on Amazon, and of course you have a lot of 5 stars, you have 4 stars. But I used to only like to go to the 1 stars because I said the 1 star will show me what doesn't work. Why? But this morning, I had sort of like a mini epiphany. I had already bought the product because I thought it was good. I read on the web, but some of the 1 star said, don't buy, don't touch it, it doesn't do that. I got the product last night, used it for the first time this morning. It worked incredibly well. So if I write a review, I'm a 5 star. And then it occurred to me, the 1 stars were very few.
Yeah.
Why was I giving them so much weight? Maybe it's a person who's very sad or angry. Maybe something happens in their life. So I just realized looking only at the 1 stars as your guide as to whether to buy a product is not necessarily the only strategy. You might want to glance at the 1 stars, but it won't hurt to read the 3 star or a 4 star.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just about developing the awareness of how our brains work. And I think Pandit and you really covered a lot of ground in that interview about how important it is to develop a mindfulness practice. You think of, the role of psychosomatic illness, which has been well documented and journaled. And then we live in such a stressful, busy world, noisy world, that this is, again, we've been talking about free things you can do or very low costly things you can do. Meditating and developing a mindfulness practice is relatively either free or very inexpensive thing you can do to manage stress and maintain your health and your overall wellness. And speaking of mindfulness and meditation, just to shift gears a little bit, you've got another interview coming up with Dr. John Beaulieu, and that's coming up next week. Tell us a little bit about what excites you about this, because he's going to teach us about sound and the role that can have and the impact on the brain, and kind of there's a mindfulness thing, a quality to it, isn't there?
So I'm very excited to talk about Dr. John Beaulieu, but just before, when we finish up, with Pandit Dasa, he said, don't be a type A meditator.
Right.
In other words, oh my God, it's not quiet enough. The dog is barking. No, sit down. Police is outside. There's noise. Just sit down and do it. Don't be a type A meditator. They're just to help. So now, John Beaulieu. As you know, Chad, we went deep into the subject of breathing, right? With James Nestor, breathing through the nose, chewing. We talked to Patrick McEwen, amazing stuff about the board score. And then from that, naturally, we learned that breathing through the nose, you create much more nitric oxide than breathing through the mouth. Nitric oxide is an unbelievable molecule, critical for our health. We talked about it a lot. I'm not going to go into it now. Well, we learned that when you hum, you can create up to 15 times as much nitric oxide. So we had an interview, which we'll talk about, with the Goldmans, who are experts on humming. Fascinating. And through them, we learned about Dr. Beaulieu, which does sound healing. And you, Chad, I know you've had experiences with sound healing. John Beaulieu uses tuning forks and other devices like balls to tune the frequency of the nervous system. So he was lucky enough to find an anechoic chamber in a university in New York City, where you don't hear anything at all, complete silence. He found that there was still a hum. And then he realized it's his nervous system, working. One day he was on the subway and he had an altercation, not his fault. He came into the chamber and the whole thing was crazy loud. And he realized sound can work both ways. So he used a tuning fork, which I use every day, by the way, now, thanks to him, to tune our nervous system to frequencies that are beneficial, that are meditative. So it goes right in line with what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Well, it's been said, and I think there's others that we've spoke to who've reinforced this, that the future of medicine may in fact be in vibration and sound healing. And I'm excited to hear what you and John have to talk about on this, because as you mentioned, I've been very interested in sound and sound healing for years, using Tibetan singing bowls and things like that. So I'm really curious from one of the leading, he may arguably be for sure one of the leading in the world in this area,
Absolutely.
from what I understand.
Absolutely. And he's an accomplished musician, so he knows the frequencies and the gaps and the steps and the perfect fifth and all of that stuff. This is really fascinating stuff. And think about it. We are made of seemingly molecules. You go deeper, it's the atom. You go deeper, all we are, you, me, this microphone, electromagnetic waves. We are just made of waves. We are packets of waves. Stands to reason that if there's a frequency of sound, which is also waves, it'll interact with our own wave nature and change it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that, we're going to break for this episode, and we're, pun intended, I'm encouraging all of you to tune in to Adiel's next interview with John Beaulieu, and he'll teach us all about sound healing and his tuning forks, and again, how you can very inexpensively use this technology, and what Adiel and Dr. Beaulieu are going to talk about to improve your own health and your own mindfulness in your own life. But until then, we'll see you next week.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining me today. Click the subscribe button for more video. Got a question or comment? I love questions and comments. Leave yours below. And here's another video you've got to see.